Get your scrawny ass back in formation, Mitchell. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez's voice cracked like a whip across the Fort Benning training field at 0530 hours. The morning PT formation stood rigid in the Georgia humidity. 48 recruits in perfect rows, except for one. Emma Mitchell, thin as a reed with mousy brown hair tinged with gold scraped into a regulation bun, clutched her right arm against her chest. She stood apart from the group, her stance awkward, favoring her left leg. In the dim pre-dawn light, she looked exactly like what everyone assumed, another washout who couldn't hack basic training. "Sergeant, I need to see medical," Emma's voice barely carried across the field. "My arm?" "Your arm what, princess?" Lance Morrison, 6'3" of pure muscle and arrogance, turned from his position at the front. His shoulders blocked out half the horizon as he stepped closer. "Got a boo-boo from yesterday's baby exercises?" Laughter rippled through the formation. Madison Brooks, blonde ponytail perfect despite the humidity, stage whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Bet she's faking. Pathetic excuse for a soldier." Rodriguez stalked forward, his combat boots crushing the dew-covered grass with deliberate force. Each step seemed calculated to intimidate. "Mitchell, you got exactly 10 seconds to rejoin formation or pack your bags. We don't do weakness here." Emma shifted, her injured arm trembling visibly against her torso. The slight movement caused her sleeve to ride up just an inch, revealing the edge of dark ink against pale skin. She quickly tugged it down with her left hand, but not before Derek Chen, always quick with his phone camera, noticed. "Yo, Princess got herself some gangster ink," Derek called out, already fumbling for his device. "What is that? A prison tat? You do time before coming here?" But every single person laughing was about to learn a lesson they would never forget. Rodriguez closed the distance between them, his face inches from Emma's. The smell of coffee and rage radiated from him as he spoke through clenched teeth. 9, 8, 7. Emma didn't move. She didn't speak. Her brown eyes, flecked with something unreadable, stayed locked on a point somewhere beyond Rodriguez's shoulder. The tremor in her right arm seemed to worsen under scrutiny, drawing more snickers from the formation. "Look at her shaking," Marcus Webb muttered loud enough to carry. "Like a scared little rabbit." 6, 5, 4. Rodriguez continued, spittle flying. Lance Morrison took a step forward, cracking his knuckles. "Just let me escort her off base, Sergeant. Save us all some time." Emma's left hand unconsciously moved to protect her right arm, specifically the area where the tattoo edge had shown. The movement was subtle, but something about it made Jake Sullivan, a veteran recently returned from deployment, narrow his eyes. There was something familiar about the way she distributed her weight, the way her feet were positioned despite the apparent injury. 3, 2, Sergeant Rodriguez. Captain Morrison's voice cut through the countdown as he approached from the administrative buildings. "What's the situation here?" Rodriguez snapped to attention briefly. "Sir, Private Mitchell is refusing to participate in PT and won't return to formation." Morrison looked at Emma, taking in her trembling form and defensive posture. His initial assessment aligned with Rodriguez's, another recruit who couldn't cut it. "Mitchell, you have a medical waiver?" Emma shook her head slightly, still maintaining her silence. "Then get back in formation or get off my base," Morrison said dismissively, already turning away. If watching Emma endure this public humiliation already has your blood boiling, then you understand exactly why these stories need to be told. Take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps more people discover these powerful moments of hidden strength. And for those incredible supporters who keep these stories alive, there's a thanks button below that makes a real difference. Now, let's see what Emma does next, as Rodriguez closes in with newfound confidence from Morrison's backing. "You heard the captain," Rodriguez growled. 1. Madison Brooks pulled out her phone, starting to film. "This is going on my story. The day we got rid of dead weight. 0. You're done, Mitchell." Rodriguez reached for Emma's shoulder to physically remove her from the field. Emma stepped back with surprising fluidity, avoiding his grasp while keeping her injured arm protected. The movement was economical, practiced. Jake Sullivan straightened slightly. He'd seen movement like that before, in places where movement meant survival. "Don't you dare evade me, recruit!" Rodriguez's face flushed red. Lance, Derek, help me escort this washout to processing. Lance Morrison grinned, stepping forward eagerly. My pleasure, Sergeant. As the two large men approached Emma from different angles, she did something unexpected. She slowly, carefully, got down into push-up position, protecting her right arm by keeping it close to her body. Oh, now she wants to exercise? Derek laughed, his phone capturing every moment. Too late, princess. But Emma wasn't giving up. Using primarily her left arm, she began doing modified push-ups. Her form, despite the obvious limitation, was technically perfect. Her back remained straight, her core engaged, her breathing controlled. Rodriguez stood over her. What the hell do you think you're doing? Emma continued the push-ups in silence. 5, 6, 7. Each one caused her sleeve to ride up slightly more, revealing more of the dark ink underneath. Those don't count, Madison shouted. She's not even using both arms properly. Lance put his boot on Emma's back, adding weight. Let's see how long Princess lasts now. Emma's body shook with the added pressure, but she continued. 8, 9, 10. The sleeve had now ridden up enough that the bottom portion of what appeared to be a coiled shape was visible. Is that a snake? Someone in the formation whispered. Jake Sullivan took an unconscious step forward. Something about the precise coiling pattern seemed familiar, tugging at memories from classified briefings he had attended overseas. Emma reached 15 push-ups when Marcus Webb accidentally kicked her injured arm. She collapsed, catching herself at the last moment with her left hand to avoid face-planting into the grass. Still, she said nothing. No grunt of pain, no curse, no plea for mercy. Pathetic, Rodriguez spat. Can't even do basic exercises. Morrison Chen, get her out of here. As Lance reached down to grab Emma's collar, Elena Rodriguez, one of the newer recruits, suddenly spoke up. Sergeant, shouldn't we let her see medical first? If she's really injured... Did I ask for your opinion, Rodriguez? The sergeant rounded on her. You want to join your friend in processing? Elena fell silent, but her eyes remained on Emma with something like concern. Emma slowly pushed herself back up to a sitting position, her right arm cradled against her chest. A grass stain now marked her PT shirt, where Lance's boot had pressed. As she adjusted her position, her dog tags shifted, catching the growing morning light. Jake noticed they weren't the standard issue. The metal was different, darker. On your feet, Mitchell, Morrison ordered. You're done here. Emma rose with surprising grace for someone supposedly injured. As she stood, she made eye contact with Jake for just a moment. He saw something in that brief connection that made his blood run cold, a depth of experience that didn't belong in a basic training recruit. The formation had broken discipline now, everyone watching the drama unfold. Phones were out despite regulations, capturing what they assumed would be the entertaining expulsion of a weak recruit. March her to the commander's office, Rodriguez ordered Lance and Derek. I'll file the paperwork for medical discharge, clearly unfit for service. As the two men flanked Emma, Lance couldn't resist one more jab. Should have stayed home, princess. Military is for real soldiers, not people who cry about a hurt arm. Emma's first instinct was to respond, her mouth opening slightly. But she caught herself, pressing her lips together and maintaining her silence. The effort of not speaking seemed almost physical, like she was fighting against years of trained responses. They began marching her away from the PT field, but Captain Morrison called out, "Hold on. Rodriguez, have her do the obstacle course first." Rodriguez looked confused. "Sir, if she's claiming injury, let's document her inability to complete basic tasks. Video evidence for the discharge paperwork." Morrison's reasoning was sound, but there was something else in his expression. A nagging curiosity about this strange, silent recruit. Madison clapped her hands together. "Oh, this is going to be good. Princess versus the rope climb with her fake injury." The entire formation was ordered to move to the obstacle course. As they marched, Emma walked between Lance and Derek, her gait steady despite favoring her right arm. Jake noticed she was unconsciously scanning the environment, checking exit points, noting the position of every person around her. It was subtle, but unmistakable to someone who'd done the same thing in hostile territory. Emma's trembling hand reached for the medical-grade nerve stabilizer in her cargo pocket, a specialized pharmaceutical compound originally developed for Parkinson's patients, but adapted by military medical units for treating combat-induced nerve damage. The injectable medication, costing over $800 per dose, could steady her hands for exactly 6 hours, long enough to complete what she came here to do. But using it now would blow her cover as a weak recruit. Her fingers brushed the injector before pulling away. Not yet. The obstacle course loomed ahead, its various challenges designed to test every aspect of physical fitness. The rope climb stood tallest, a 30-foot ascent that challenged even the fittest recruits with both arms functional. "Ladies first," Rodriguez said mockingly, gesturing Emma toward the course. "Let's see what you've got, princess." The entire company gathered around, forming a human amphitheater. More phones came out, everyone eager to document what they assumed would be a spectacular failure. Emma approached the first obstacle, low crawl under barbed wire. She studied it for several seconds, her head tilting slightly as if calculating something. "Sometime today, Mitchell," Rodriguez barked. Emma dropped to her stomach and began crawling. Her technique was flawless, using her legs and left arm to propel herself while keeping her right arm protected but not completely inactive. She moved through the wire faster than most recruits did, with both arms fully functional. "Lucky," Derek muttered, but his voice carried less conviction than before. The wall climb was next, 8 feet of vertical wooden planks with minimal handholds. Emma stood before it, her body still, that tremor in her right arm seemingly worse now. "She's going to need a ladder," Madison laughed, "or maybe a medical evac." Emma took 3 steps back, then burst forward with explosive speed. She hit the wall with her left side, leading, used her momentum to reach high with her left hand, and somehow managed to swing her body up and over in one fluid motion. The entire maneuver took less than 4 seconds. The laughter died down noticeably. Jake Sullivan moved closer to Captain Morrison. "Sir, that technique?" "I see it," Morrison replied quietly, his eyes now locked on Emma with newfound interest. The rope climb was the main event. 30 feet of thick rope, no knots, just raw grip strength and technique needed to ascend. "This ought to be good," Lance said loudly. "Princess can barely hold her arm up, let alone climb a rope." Emma stood at the base of the rope, looking up its entire length. Her left hand reached out, grasping the rope experimentally. Then, in a movement that made several Marines in the crowd straighten with recognition, she wrapped her legs around the rope in a specific pattern, a technique taught in advanced military schools, not basic training. "Holy sh!" Jake caught himself. "That's a Marine fast rope technique." Emma began to climb. Using primarily her legs and left arm, she ascended with mechanical precision. Her injured right arm stayed close to her body, but wasn't completely inactive. She used it for minimal stabilization at key points. The economy of motion was beautiful, each movement calculated to maximize efficiency while minimizing strain on her injury. The crowd had gone quiet. Even the phones lowered slightly as people watched, mesmerized by the unexpected display of skill. 15 feet, 20, 25. "How is she doing that?" Elena whispered. Emma reached the top in 43 seconds, with one arm compromised. The current company record with both arms was 38 seconds. She touched the beam at the top, then descended with equal control. When her feet touched the ground, she turned to face Rodriguez and spoke her first real word since the confrontation began. "Done, Sergeant." Her voice was calm, quiet, carrying no trace of exertion, despite what she'd just accomplished. Rodriguez's face showed complete confusion mixed with growing anger. He'd been made to look foolish, and he knew it. "That was adequate," he managed. "But one lucky climb doesn't—" "Sergeant Rodriguez," Captain Morrison interrupted, stepping forward. "A word." As the two men conferred in harsh whispers, the crowd buzzed with speculation. Lance and Derek exchanged uncertain looks, their earlier confidence evaporating. "Did you see how she climbed?" a recruit whispered. "That's not something you learn on YouTube." Madison, trying to salvage her position as Queen Bee, spoke loudly. "So she can climb a rope. Big deal. Probably learned it in whatever gang she ran with before coming here. Did you see that tattoo?" Emma stood perfectly still, her injured arm still held protectively against her body. But Jake noticed something else. Her breathing. Despite the rapid climb, she wasn't winded. Her respiratory rate was controlled, measured. Combat breathing, they called it, in special operations. Morrison finished his conversation with Rodriguez and approached Emma directly. "Mitchell, where did you learn that climbing technique?" Emma met his gaze steadily but didn't answer. "I asked you a question, Private." Still silence. Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Rodriguez, take the company through weapons assembly. I want Mitchell in my office. Now." As the formation reluctantly moved toward the armory, Jake overheard Morrison making a phone call. "I need a full background check on a Private Emma Mitchell. Something's not adding up here." The weapons assembly area was a covered pavilion with tables arranged in rows. Each station had an M4 carbine, disassembled, waiting for recruits to prove their mechanical knowledge. Rodriguez, still fuming from the rope climb incident, pointed Emma to a table at the front. "Since you're so talented, Mitchell, why don't you show us how it's done? You have 2 minutes to properly assemble this weapon." Emma approached the table, her right arm trembling worse than before. As she looked at the scattered parts, Derek filmed eagerly. "This is going to be epic. Princess trying to put together a rifle with her shaky hands." Emma reached for the lower receiver with her left hand. Her right hand moved to support it, but the tremor made her grip unstable. The part slipped, clattering onto the table. "There we go!" Lance shouted. "Back to reality!" Emma tried again. This time she knocked over the barrel with her elbow, then dropped the bolt carrier. Each mistake drew more laughter, and phone cameras focused on her growing collection of failures. "Pathetic," Rodriguez announced. "Can't even handle basic equipment. This is why we don't accept people who aren't physically capable of..." But Jake Sullivan was watching differently. As a veteran, he'd seen plenty of recruits fumble with weapon assembly. What Emma was doing was different. She was dropping parts in a specific order, her fingers moving in patterns that seemed random, but "That's impossible," Jake breathed. Elena, standing nearby, whispered, "What's impossible?" "She's not fumbling. She's demonstrating a disassembly sequence from the Advanced Armorer's Manual, but backwards, and from memory." Did you notice how Emma's hand unconsciously moved to protect that tattoo? Something's definitely not adding up here. Drop a comment if you caught that detail too, or share your own story about being completely misjudged. Meanwhile, Rodriguez is about to make a decision that will haunt him forever as Captain Morrison returns with a disturbing discovery. Morrison burst through the door, his face pale. He was clutching a tablet, his knuckles white around the device. "Sergeant Rodriguez, clear the building. Everyone out except Mitchell." "Sir, what?" "Now, Sergeant." The urgency in Morrison's voice killed all protest. Recruits filed out quickly, phones disappearing into pockets. But Jake lingered near the door, his instincts screaming that something significant was happening. "You too, Sullivan," Morrison ordered, but his voice was distracted, his eyes locked on Emma. Once the building was empty except for the three of them, Morrison held up the tablet. "Your background check came back, Mitchell. It's interesting. Perfect scores in high school, clean record, normal childhood in suburban Ohio. It's absolutely flawless." He paused. "Too flawless, the kind of background file that's been sanitized." Emma remained silent, still cradling her injured arm. "Then I made some calls, used some connections from my time at Bragg. Mentioned your climbing technique, the way you move, that partial tattoo we saw." Morrison's voice dropped. "One name kept coming up, Unit 731. Rodriguez scoffed. "That's just military urban legend, sir. Ghost units that don't exist." Morrison ignored him, focusing on Emma. 7 years ago, a joint operation in Syria went sideways. 5 operators went in. 1 came out. The survivor held off enemy forces for 72 hours, protecting the extraction point for a Marine unit that was pinned down. During those 3 days, this operator was captured, tortured, but never broke, never gave up the Marine's position. Emma's right arm trembled more violently. The survivor had nerve damage from electrical torture, permanent tremor in the right arm. But here's the interesting part. This operative disappeared after the debrief, vanished, became a ghost. Morrison stepped closer. "Want to know what unit that operative belonged to?" Rodriguez had gone very still, his earlier bravado evaporating. 731, the Black Viper Squadron, and every member had a very specific tattoo. 7 coils representing the 7 original members. A skull in the snake's mouth representing death itself. The room was silent except for the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. "Show me your arm, Mitchell," Morrison ordered. Emma didn't move. That's a direct order from a superior officer. Still nothing. Rodriguez, his voice now uncertain, said, "Sir, maybe we should—" The door burst open. Lance Morrison and Derek Chen stumbled in, phones raised. "Sorry, sir, but this is too good to miss. We gotta see Princess get busted for stolen valor or whatever." "Get out!" Morrison roared, but it was too late. Marcus Webb had followed them in, and in his typical bullying fashion, reached for Emma's injured arm. "Let's see this fake tattoo that's got everyone so—" The moment Marcus grabbed Emma's right arm, everything changed. Her body moved on pure instinct. In a fluid motion that spoke of years of muscle memory, she trapped Marcus's wrist, pivoted her hip, and sent him flying over her shoulder. He hit the ground hard, the air exploding from his lungs. Emma had him in an arm lock before anyone could blink, her knee pressed against his spine. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. Then, as if suddenly remembering where she was, Emma released him and stepped back. Marcus rolled away, gasping, clutching his arm. Emma's sleeve had been pulled up in the altercation. The tattoo was now fully visible. A black snake with 7 distinct coils wrapped around her forearm, its mouth open to reveal fangs sunk into a human skull. Below it, numbers were etched into the design. 731. Holy mother of... Rodriguez couldn't finish. Lance had dropped his phone. It clattered on the concrete floor, the screen cracking. Derek stood frozen, his recording still running, but his hand shaking. Emma spoke, her voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. "I'm sorry. Reflex." Captain Morrison's tablet slipped from nerveless fingers. You're real. 731 is real." "Sir," Emma said, finally breaking her extended silence. "I need to speak with Colonel Matthews. Immediately." "Colonel Matthews?" Morrison's voice cracked. "The base commander? Why would—" "Because someone on this base sold out my unit. 4 ghosts are dead because of intel that could only have come from Fort Benning. I'm not here for basic training, Captain. I'm here for justice." The room erupted. Derek scrambled for his phone, trying to delete the video he'd been taking. Lance backed against the wall, his face white. Marcus, still on the ground, whimpered something about not meaning it. Rodriguez found his voice. "This is impossible. You're just a recruit, a washout. You couldn't even do proper push-ups." Emma turned to him, and for the first time, allowed a hint of emotion to cross her face. It wasn't anger or satisfaction. It was sadness. "I did 47 full push-ups in Syria after 3 days of torture. Your boot on my back was nothing, Sergeant. But I needed you to believe I was weak. Everyone had to believe it." "Why?" Elena had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. "Why let us treat you that way?" Emma's answer was simple. Because the traitor was watching. They've been watching every new recruit, looking for threats. If I came in strong, skilled, suspicious, they'd run, or worse, they'd target me before I could find them. Captain Morrison rapidly accessed the military's encrypted communication system through his ruggedized field tablet, its quantum encryption protocols designed for classified intelligence operations. The device, worth more than most soldiers' annual salary, featured biometric locks and self-destruct capabilities that activated if unauthorized access was attempted. As he waited for Bragg's response, the specialized satellite uplink maintained perfect clarity despite the base's electronic countermeasures, a testament to the defense contractor's billion-dollar investment in unbreakable battlefield communications. "I'm calling the Colonel," Morrison said, his hands shaking as he initiated the secure connection. "This is way above my pay grade." While Morrison made the call, the room remained frozen in a tableau of shock. Emma stood calmly in the center, her right arm still trembling, but her posture radiating controlled power. The morning sun slanted through the windows, casting harsh shadows that seemed to emphasize the divide between who they thought she was and who she really was. Jake Sullivan pushed through the crowd at the door. "Tower 4, Syria, December 23rd, 2019. Emma's eyes snapped to him. "You were Overwatch, Venom Strike Operation. My unit was pinned down by insurgents. We called for extraction, but were told no assets available. Then someone, a ghost sniper, started taking out targets from an impossible position. Saved 13 Marines that day." Emma studied him for a long moment. "Corporal Sullivan, 3rd Platoon. You had a St. Christopher medal wrapped around your rifle stock. Jake's voice was thick with emotion. That was you. You saved us. Then you vanished into the dust storm. Command told us you never existed. Ghosts don't exist, Emma replied quietly. That's the point. The crowd at the door had grown. Word spread quickly in a military base, and now dozens of recruits and instructors gathered, phones out despite regulations, capturing this impossible moment. Madison pushed her way to the front. This is ridiculous. She's just some nobody playing soldier. Look at her. She can barely hold her arm steady. Emma turned to Madison with those calm brown eyes. The scrutiny made Madison step back involuntarily. The tremor, Emma said, loud enough for everyone to hear, is from 12 hours of electrical interrogation. They wanted the position of Marine Forward Operating Base Falcon. 13 Marines, including Corporal Sullivan, would have died if I'd broken. She held up her right arm, letting everyone see the constant shake. This is the price of keeping secrets. Every tremor is a life saved. The silence was deafening. But I failed my unit, Emma continued, her voice carrying pain she'd held for years. Someone leaked our insertion point. 4 operators died in an ambush that was waiting for us. Only I survived, and I've spent 3 years tracking the source of that leak. It led here, to Fort Benning. Colonel Matthews arrived like a storm, full bird. Colonel, 20-year veteran, commanded respect from everyone on base. He pushed through the crowd, took one look at Emma's revealed tattoo, and did something that shocked everyone present. He removed his cover and saluted. Operative Mitchell, he said, his voice formal. Colonel James Matthews. I was briefed on Unit 731 when I took command here. I was told you were all KIA. Emma returned the salute with precision. Ghosts are hard to kill, sir, Rodriguez stammered. Colonel, sir, I don't understand. She's just a recruit. Sergeant Rodriguez, Matthews cut him off. You've been insulting and demeaning one of the most decorated operators in Black Ops history. 731 doesn't officially exist because what they did was so classified, so dangerous, that acknowledging them would compromise ongoing operations worldwide. The weight of this revelation crashed over the assembled crowd. Phones lowered as the magnitude of their mistake became clear. Clear the building, Matthews ordered. Everyone out. This is now a classified debriefing. As people reluctantly filed out, Emma called, Corporal Sullivan, stay. You might be helpful. Lance tried to slink away, but Emma's voice stopped him. Morrison, Chen, Webb, Brooks, you stay too. Why? Derek asked, his voice small. Because one of you might have seen something. The traitor has been operating on this base for 3 years. They're careful, but everyone makes mistakes. Emma's gaze swept over them. And because you need to understand what your mockery almost cost. If I'd been forced to reveal myself early, the traitor would have disappeared. More operators would die. This is it, the moment that changes everything. If you know someone who's been underestimated or dismissed because of how they look, share this with them. They need to see what's about to unfold. Because Emma's secret is about to explode into the open, and the real enemy is closer than anyone suspects. Matthews secured the room, engaging electronic countermeasures that would prevent any recording devices from functioning. The sudden silence as phones died was eerie. Now, Matthews said, tell me everything. Emma moved to the wall where a map of Fort Benning was displayed. Her tactical assessment mode engaged visibly. Her posture shifted. The tremors seemed to fade into background noise as focus took over. 3 years ago, Operation Venom Strike was compromised. We were inserting into Syria to eliminate a high-value target who was coordinating attacks on U.S. forces. 5 operators, including myself. The intel was perfect. Too perfect. It was a trap. She pointed to locations on the map as if it were Syria. Stevens took the first hit. Sniper, exactly where no sniper should have been. Rodriguez, different Rodriguez, not you, Sergeant, caught an IED that was planted after our last surveillance. They knew our exact route. Jake Sullivan listened intently, recognizing the operational cadence in her voice. Thompson and Chen held the perimeter while I tried to reach our emergency extraction point. They died buying me time. 43 insurgents were waiting. Someone told them exactly when and where we'd be. Her finger traced patterns on the map, muscle memory from that horrible night. I held position for 72 hours. No food, minimal water, ammunition running low. They captured me twice. I escaped twice. The second time is when they used the electrical cables. Emma's right hand spasmed involuntarily at the memory. But they made a mistake. One of them mentioned Fort Benning, said their source was still at the schoolhouse. Only someone who'd been military would call it that. Matthews leaned forward. And you've been hunting ever since. Official channels got me nowhere. Unit 731 was disbanded, declared KIA to protect ongoing operations. So I went dark, created a new identity, tracked financial records, communication patterns, travel histories. Everything led here. Why come in as a recruit? Rodriguez asked, his earlier antagonism replaced by professional interest. Because the traitor is smart. They've been here for years, trusted, integrated. If I came in as an investigator, they'd vanish. But a weak recruit, someone to mock and dismiss, no threat at all. Emma pulled out a small device from her pocket, not the nerve stabilizer, but something that looked like a simple thumb drive. I've been recording everything, not video. That's too obvious. Metadata, communication patterns, who talks to whom when they leave base, unusual financial activity. She plugged it into Morrison's tablet. Data flowed across the screen. 5 names kept appearing in correlation with known enemy communication nodes. All 5 are on this base. One of them sold out my unit. The names appeared on screen. Morrison gasped. One was a senior NCO he'd known for years. This is why I needed to maintain cover, Emma continued. I've been watching them all, waiting for them to make contact with their handler. It was supposed to happen this week. New intel suggests another operation is being planned, another unit targeted for ambush. Who? Matthews demanded. SEAL Team 9 has an operation scheduled for next month, same region where my unit was hit. If we don't stop this traitor, more operators will die. The weight of this settled over the room. This wasn't about basic training drama. This was about life and death for America's elite warriors. Madison, who had been silent since the revelation, suddenly spoke. The maintenance sergeant, Davis, he was asking weird questions about the new recruits. Said he was doing a security survey, but Emma's attention snapped to her. What kind of questions? About backgrounds, where people were from, but specifically about anyone with prior service or family in special operations. When? Yesterday, right after you climbed the rope. Emma exchanged looks with Matthews. He saw the technique, recognized it. He's checking if I'm a threat. Without warning, Emma moved to the window, peering out carefully. Her body language shifted, predator sensing danger. We need to move, now. What do you see? Matthews asked, moving toward Emma's position. 2 vehicles that weren't there during morning PT. Black sedan, government plates, but wrong sequence for base vehicles. Silver pickup, mud pattern suggests it came from the east access road. That gate's supposed to be locked. Matthews grabbed his radio. Security, this is Matthews. Lock down the base. No one in or out. Sir, the radio crackled back. Maintenance Sergeant Davis just cleared the east gate 5 minutes ago. Said he had a family emergency. Emma was already moving. He knows. Someone tipped him. She turned to Rodriguez. You announced clearing the building over open comms. He heard. The room erupted into motion. Matthews barked orders into his radio, while Morrison pulled up base schematics on his tablet. But Emma was focused on something else. Jake Sullivan was staring at the 5 names on the screen with a strange expression. Corporal Sullivan, Emma said quietly. What is it? Davis. He was there, in Syria. Not with your unit, but he ran supply convoys through our sector. Always knew which routes were safe, which were hot. We thought he was just lucky. Emma's eyes went cold. Show me his convoy logs. Morrison's fingers flew over the tablet, pulling up historical records. The pattern emerged quickly. Davis's convoys had never been hit. Not once in 3 deployments. Every other supply sergeant had at least a few close calls, but Davis was untouched. He wasn't lucky, Emma said. He was protected. He was feeding them information, and they kept his convoys safe in exchange. Rodriguez slammed his fist on the table. That son of a... I served with him for 2 years. That's how sleepers work, Emma replied. They integrate, build trust, become part of the furniture, until they're activated. An alarm began blaring across the base. Lockdown protocol was in effect. But Emma knew it was already too late. Davis had a 5-minute head start and knew every back road, every security gap. "We need vehicles," Matthews commanded. "Morrison, coordinate with—" "No," Emma interrupted. "Too slow. He's heading for his handler. This is our only chance to catch them both." She looked at the assembled group. "I need someone who knows the terrain, every deer path, every shortcut." Lance Morrison, who had been silent since the revelation, suddenly spoke. "I grew up here. My dad was stationed at Benning for 15 years. I know every inch of this place and the surrounding area." Emma studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You're driving?" "I'm coming too," Jake said. "And me," Rodriguez added, his jaw set with determination. Emma shook her head. "Too many, Lance and I only, smaller footprint, faster movement." Matthews started to protest, but Emma was already stripping off her PT gear to reveal a compression shirt underneath. She pulled a concealed sidearm from an ankle holster none of them had noticed. She'd been armed this entire time. "How did you—" Derek started. "Ghost privileges," Emma said simply. "Lance, we need your vehicle now." As they rushed outside, Madison called after them. "What should we do?" Emma paused at the door. "Watch the other 4 names. If any of them try to run, you'll know they're involved too." Lance's lifted F-250 was exactly what Emma expected from him. Overly aggressive, unnecessarily loud, but perfect for what they needed. He gunned it toward the east gate, while Emma worked her phone with her left hand, her right still trembling against her leg. "How do you know where he's going?" Lance asked, taking a corner at dangerous speed. "Pattern analysis. Davis has been making drops at the same 3 locations for months, always during his family emergencies. He doesn't know that I know." They blew through the east gate, the guards already alerted to let them pass. The silver pickup's tracks were fresh in the morning dew, heading east toward the Chattahoochee National Forest. "He's got maybe 3 minutes on us," Lance said, pushing the truck harder. Emma pulled up satellite imagery on her phone. "There's an old fire access road 4 miles ahead. He'll turn north there. It leads to an abandoned ranger station." "How can you be sure?" "Because that's where I would go. Isolated, multiple escape routes, good sight lines." She checked her weapon with practiced efficiency despite the tremor. "And because I've been tracking cell tower pings from that location for 2 weeks. Someone's been using a satellite phone there. Only people who use sat phones in Georgia are drug dealers and intelligence assets." Lance glanced at her, seeing not the weak recruit he'd mocked, but the predator she truly was. "I'm sorry. For everything. The way we treated you—" "Save it," Emma cut him off. "Guilt later. Focus now." They hit the fire road at 70 miles per hour, the truck fishtailing in the gravel. Lance fought for control, managed it, kept pushing. The forest closed in around them, shadows dancing between the trees. "There," Emma pointed. Fresh tire tracks veered off onto an even smaller path, barely visible through the undergrowth. Lance didn't hesitate, cranking the wheel hard. Branches scraped against the truck's paint, a sound that would normally make him cringe but now barely registered. The ranger station appeared through the trees, a ramshackle building that had seen better decades. Davis's silver pickup was parked outside, engine still running. But there was another vehicle too, a black SUV with tinted windows. "The handler," Emma breathed. "We got them both." "Wait for backup?" Lance asked, already knowing the answer. "No time. They're probably destroying evidence right now." Emma checked her weapon one more time. "You're not trained for this. Stay here, call it in." "Like hell," Lance said, producing a Glock from his glove box. "I may be an asshole, but I'm an asshole who knows how to shoot." Emma almost smiled. "You ever been in a real firefight?" "No." "Then follow my lead and try not to die. Your death would create too much paperwork." They exited the vehicle quietly, Emma moving with that eerie grace despite her injury. Lance tried to emulate her movement, suddenly aware of how loud his footsteps sounded on the gravel, voices carried from inside the station. Emma held up 2 fingers, 2 voices, both male. She pointed to herself, then the front door, then to Lance and the back. He nodded understanding. Emma counted down on her fingers. 3, 2, 1. She hit the front door hard, weapon up and sweeping. "Nobody move!" Davis was at a table with another man, Middle Eastern features, expensive suit, incongruous in the rustic setting. Laptop computers and stacks of cash covered the table between them. Both men froze for a split second. Then everything went sideways. The handler, because that's clearly what he was, flipped the table toward Emma while Davis went for a weapon. Emma sidestepped the table, tracking the handler, but her tremor threw off her first shot. It went wide, showering splinters from the wall. Davis cleared his weapon, swinging it toward Emma. Time slowed. She could see his finger tightening on the trigger, knew her tremor would make her second shot unreliable at this distance. A gunshot exploded behind Davis. He staggered forward, his shot going wild, and collapsed. Lance stood in the back doorway, Glock smoking, face pale but determined. The handler used the distraction to lunge for the window. Emma pivoted, ignoring her tremor, and put 2 rounds center mass. He crashed through the glass anyway, but landed in a heap outside, not moving. The silence after gunfire is always deafening. Emma kept her weapon trained on Davis while Lance covered the handler through the broken window, but both men were down and staying down. "Clear," Emma announced after checking both bodies for pulse. The handler was dead, but Davis was still breathing, barely. She knelt beside him, applying pressure to the wound. "Sergeant Davis, you're going to die, but you can die with some honor. Tell me who else is involved." Davis's eyes focused on her with difficulty. Blood frothed at his lips. You're 731. Thought you were all dead." "I'm hard to kill. Who else, Davis? How many more units are you targeting?" He coughed, spraying blood. Thought I was Patriot. They said military industrial complex needed to be. Who said? Emma pressed. Who recruited you? But Davis's eyes had already gone glassy. Whatever secrets he held died with him. Lance stood frozen, still pointing his Glock at the window. I killed him." "You saved my life," Emma corrected, gently taking the weapon from his shaking hands. "He would have shot me. My tremor. I couldn't have made that shot in time." The sound of approaching vehicles filled the air, backup finally arriving. Emma quickly photographed everything on the table before the scene would be locked down. Financial records, communication logs, target packages for future operations. The intelligence hall was massive. 3 more units, she said, reading from one document. They were planning to hit 3 more special operations units over the next year. We just saved a lot of lives. Matthews arrived with a full security detail, taking in the scene with professional assessment. Status: 2 hostiles down, Davis and his handler. We have intel on a larger network. Emma handed him a thumb drive she'd pulled from the laptop. "This needs to go to counterintelligence immediately." "Outstanding work." Matthews turned to Lance. "You too, Morrison. That took guts." Lance was still pale, still processing. "I just followed her lead, sir." As the scene was processed and statements were taken, Emma found herself standing apart, watching the organized chaos. The tremor in her right arm seemed worse now that the adrenaline was fading. Rodriguez approached cautiously. Operative Mitchell, I owe you an apology. The way I treated you." "You did your job," Emma replied. "You saw a weak recruit and responded accordingly. That's what I needed you to see. But the disrespect helped maintain my cover, although," she allowed a tiny smile, "your boot on my back was unnecessary. I'll remember that during your next fitness evaluation." Rodriguez paled, unsure if she was joking. The aftermath investigation required Colonel Matthews to process the security breach using advanced counterintelligence software, including facial recognition systems that could analyze micro-expressions and archive security footage. The AI-powered platform, originally developed for Homeland Security's airport screening programs, had been adapted for military use to detect deception patterns and stress indicators. Within hours, the system would process thousands of hours of base recordings, searching for the moment someone made contact with enemy agents who had destroyed Emma's unit. By evening, Fort Benning was in full crisis mode. The intelligence Emma had recovered revealed a network spanning 4 bases, with 12 compromised personnel. The takedown operations were swift and coordinated, guided by her analysis. Emma stood in Colonel Matthews' office, her arm in a proper medical sling now. The base doctors had been horrified at the nerve damage she'd been enduring without treatment. "What now?" Matthews asked. "Your cover's blown. Everyone knows who you are." My work here is done, Emma replied. 731 may be officially dead, but there are other ghosts out there, other units that need justice. You could stay, train our people. God knows they could learn from you. Emma shook her head. That's not who I am. I'm not a teacher. I'm a hunter. A knock on the door interrupted them. Matthews called Ender, and the morning's antagonists filed in. Lance, Madison, Derek, Marcus, even Rodriguez. They stood awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. We wanted to apologize, Madison said, speaking for the group. The way we treated you was inexcusable. You couldn't have known, Emma said simply. That's not the point, Lance interjected. We judged you on appearance, mocked you for showing weakness. We were everything wrong with... Emma held up her hand, stopping him. You want forgiveness? Fine, you're forgiven, but don't do it for me. Do it for the next person who doesn't look like they belong, because there will be a next person, and they might not be a ghost. They might just be someone trying their best. The group absorbed this in silence. Can I ask, Derek said hesitantly, about Syria? What really happened? Emma was quiet for a long moment. You want a war story? Heroes and villains, clear-cut battles? She shook her head. War isn't like that. It's mud and blood and friends dying for reasons that stop making sense. It's holding position while electricity runs through your body, because giving up means more good people die. She looked at each of them. You want to honor what happened? Be better, train harder, look out for each other, and never, ever judge a book by its cover. As they filed out, Jake Sullivan remained behind. That night in Syria, Tower 4, you held that position for 3 days with no support. I had support, Emma corrected. I had the knowledge that 13 Marines were counting on me. That's all the support I needed. Jake pulled something from his pocket, the St. Christopher medal she'd mentioned. This kept me alive that night. Your Overwatch kept me alive. I want you to have it. Emma looked at the medal for a long moment, then shook her head. Give it to someone who needs protection. I'm already dead, remember? 3 days later, Emma Mitchell disappeared from Fort Benning as quietly as she'd arrived. Her barracks room was empty, her paperwork filed, her false identity erased from the system, but her impact remained. Rodriguez implemented new training protocols, emphasizing respect for all recruits regardless of appearance. Madison started an anti-bullying campaign that spread across military social media. Derek began studying intelligence work, inspired by Emma's analytical methods. Marcus volunteered for additional combat training, determined to be worthy of the uniform. And Lance Morrison, who'd fired his first shot in anger to save a life, began the long process of understanding what that meant. The base never forgot the quiet recruit with the trembling arm who turned out to be death incarnate. Weeks passed. The intelligence network Emma had exposed was rolled up systematically. Lives were saved. Operations continued uncompromised. But of Emma Mitchell, or whatever her real name was, there was no sign. Then, 6 months later, Jake Sullivan received a package. No return address, no postal markings. Inside was a photograph. 5 operators in black gear standing before a helicopter in Syria. Their faces were obscured, but one was smaller than the others, standing with a particular stillness he recognized. On the back, in precise handwriting, "Ghosts don't die, they multiply. Tower 4 sends its regards." He showed it to Rodriguez, who'd kept Emma's training philosophy alive in every class. The sergeant studied it carefully, noting details. Look, Rodriguez pointed to the background. Those mountains, that's not Syria. Then where? Jake stopped. In the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a newspaper stand. The papers were in a language he didn't recognize, but the date was clear. 3 days ago. She's operational again, Rodriguez said quietly. Somewhere in Eastern Europe by the look of it. They burned the photo per protocol, but the message was clear. Emma Mitchell was still out there, still hunting, still protecting those who would never know her name. Lance Morrison kept his own reminder, a small scar on his hand from glass fragments when they'd breached the ranger station. He'd look at it sometimes during training, remembering the trembling recruit who'd shown him what real strength looked like. Madison Brooks, now running support groups for female recruits, would tell Emma's story to those struggling with discrimination. Not the classified details, but the important parts. That strength comes in many forms. that judgment based on appearance is the weakness of the judge, not the judged. But it was Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the sergeant, who perhaps understood best. She'd seen something in Emma from the beginning, had tried to help when everyone else mocked. Now she worked in intelligence, having discovered her talent for seeing what others missed. A year after Emma's departure, Fort Benning received an unusual alert. A new recruit had arrived, paperwork perfect, background clean, too clean. This recruit was older, walked with a slight limp, spoke with a heavy accent. Rodriguez watched from his office as the recruit joined formation, noted how the other recruits began the familiar pattern of mockery for the outsider, but this time, Lance Morrison was there as an instructor. Madison Brooks was watching from the support office. Derek Chen, now in intelligence training, had flagged the too perfect file. They all saw what others missed. The way the recruit cataloged exits, the perfect weight distribution despite the limp, the eyes that saw everything while appearing to see nothing. Rodriguez picked up his phone, dialed a number that went to a voicemail box that didn't officially exist. Package arrived, handling with care. He didn't expect a response. Ghosts don't make social calls, but 3 days later, a single text appeared on his personal phone from an unknown number. Good hunting. The new recruit turned out to be exactly what they seemed. A foreign officer cross-training with U.S. forces. No ghost, no secret identity. But the fact that they'd checked, that they'd learned to look beyond the surface, that they'd protected someone who might have been vulnerable, that was Emma's true legacy. Fort Benning's training evolved. What had been a place where conformity was enforced through mockery became something more nuanced. Strength was recognized in all its forms. Silence was no longer mistaken for weakness. Trembling hands were no longer cause for mockery. They might be the hands that had held a position for 72 hours to save lives. 5 years passed. The global war on terror evolved, shifted, presented new challenges. Units that should have been ambushed weren't. Operations that should have failed succeeded. Someone was hunting the hunters, protecting the protectors. Occasionally, reports would surface in classified briefings, an impossible shot from an impossible distance that saved a patrol, intelligence that arrived just in time to prevent a catastrophe, always in places where someone with nerve damage shouldn't be able to operate, always signed with the same cryptic note, 731. Colonel Matthews, promoted to general now, kept a file that didn't officially exist. In it were reports, sightings, fragments of intelligence that suggested Emma Mitchell, or someone very much like her, was still operational. The tremor hadn't stopped her. Age hadn't slowed her. She had become what she'd always been, a ghost story that saved lives. But the real transformation was at Fort Benning and bases like it. The culture of automatic mockery for anyone who seemed different or weak had shifted, not eliminated. Military culture changes slowly, but challenged. Every instructor had heard the story of the trembling recruit who turned out to be death itself. Every recruit knew that the person beside them might be more than they appeared. Rodriguez, now a master sergeant, made it part of his welcome speech to every new class. You will be tempted to judge each other on appearance, on perceived weakness, on who doesn't fit your idea of a warrior. Remember that the greatest warrior I ever met looks like someone's lost daughter and couldn't hold her arm steady. Remember that strength isn't always visible. Remember that the person you mock today might be the one saving your life tomorrow. And sometimes, late at night when the base was quiet, he'd think about that morning when he'd put his boot on the back of a legend and demanded push-ups. The shame of it never quite left, but neither did the lesson. In his desk drawer, he kept a printed email that had arrived years ago from an address that traced to nowhere. You learned. That matters more than the mistake. Keep teaching. He never knew how she'd gotten his personal email. Ghost privileges, he supposed. The war on terror ground on. Names and faces changed, but the mission remained. And somewhere out there, a woman with a trembling hand and steady aim continued her hunt. Not for glory or recognition. Ghosts don't need such things. But for the operators who would never know they'd been saved, for the families who would never have to fold a flag, for the justice that only comes from preventing injustice. The tremor in her hand had become worse over the years, the nerve damage progressing as doctors had warned. But Emma Mitchell had learned something in Syria that no medical textbook could teach. The body's limitations were only suggestions if the will was strong enough. She'd adapted, evolved, turned her weakness into a different kind of strength. New technologies helped, stabilizing braces that were years ahead of public medical science, medications that could steady her hand for critical moments. But mostly it was experience, muscle memory so deep it transcended nerve damage. She'd learned to shoot between tremors, to time her breathing with the shaking, to make her disability part of her technique. The younger ghosts she sometimes worked with, because Unit 731 had never really died, just transformed, would watch in awe as she'd make impossible shots with a hand that shook like autumn leaves. They'd ask how, and she'd give the same answer. Necessity is the mother of adaptation. But her real legacy wasn't in the operations that never made the news, or the lives saved by prevented ambushes. It was in the change of culture at places like Fort Benning, where difference was no longer automatically weakness, where silence was no longer mistaken for inability, where judgment was reserved until actions spoke. Lance Morrison, now a Special Forces captain, carried those lessons forward. He'd become known for assembling unconventional teams, for seeing potential where others saw problems. His selection process baffled conventional military thinking. He'd pick the soldier with the stutter, who noticed details others missed. The one with the limp who'd developed supernatural balance to compensate. The quiet one, everyone overlooked, who turned out to have a mind like a computer. Morrison's Misfits, they were called, and they had the highest mission success rate in their unit. When asked about his selection criteria, Lance would tell a story about a trembling recruit and a rope climb, about judgment and redemption, about learning to see strength in unexpected places. He never mentioned the ranger station or the shot that saved a ghost. Some stories were for public consumption, others were carved in private memory. Madison Brooks had risen through the ranks of military psychology, specializing in identifying and nurturing overlooked talent. Her doctoral thesis on perceived weakness as strategic advantage in military operations became required reading at the War College. In it, she never named Emma Mitchell, but those who knew the story recognized the inspiration. Elena Rodriguez achieved her own form of ghosthood. Working in intelligence so classified, her family thought she had a desk job in logistics. She'd learned from Emma that the best operators were those no one suspected, and had built her career on being underestimated. Her slight frame and young face got her dismissed in meetings until she produced intelligence that saved operations. She'd learned to smile at the dismissal, knowing it was its own form of armor. Marcus Webb, the one who'd grabbed Emma's arm and triggered the revelation, had perhaps traveled the furthest. The moment haunted him. Not the takedown, but the realization of how badly he'd misjudged someone. He'd become a combat medic, dedicated to saving lives rather than judging them. In his kit, he carried nerve stabilizers and tremor reduction medications, just in case. He'd never met another 731, but if he did, he'd be ready. Derek Chen channeled his shame into purpose. The video he'd tried to delete became his reminder. He kept a screenshot of Emma's tattoo as his phone background. Not as glory or trophy, but as warning against assumption. He worked in base security now, trained to spot both threats and hidden assets. His reports always included a section on anomalous behavior patterns that merit deeper investigation rather than dismissal. And Drill Sergeant Rodriguez? He retired after 25 years, his final speech to his last class carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. I once put my boot on the back of someone who could have killed me with her pinky finger. She let me because the mission required it. She taught me that true strength is knowing when not to use it, and true leadership is learning from your failures. Don't be the person I was that morning. Be the person she showed me I could become. He returned to Texas, where he ran a program for veterans transitioning to civilian life. On his desk was a photo from that morning. Someone had captured the moment just before everything changed, when Emma was still just princess, and they were all still ignorant. He kept it as a reminder that everyone deserves respect until their actions prove otherwise. And even then, there might be more to the story. Years later, a package arrived at his home. No return address, postmarked from somewhere in Eastern Europe. Inside was a challenge coin unlike any he'd seen. Black metal with a 7-coiled snake wrapped around a skull. On the reverse, coordinates and a date. He looked them up. Syria, December 23rd, 2019. Tower 4. The note was simple. For the lesson learned, Ghost won. He knew he'd never see her again. Ghosts don't do reunions. But somewhere in the world, Emma Mitchell continued her mission. The tremor in her hand was worse now. He'd heard through channels that didn't officially exist. But she'd adapted, evolved, overcome. Because that's what ghosts do. They find a way. And at Fort Benning, every morning at 0530, a new group of recruits would form up for PT. Among them would be the ones who didn't fit. Too small, too old, too different, too something. The instructors would watch them all, but especially those ones. Because they'd learned, through pain and shame and redemption, that the most dangerous person in formation might be the one who looked like they didn't belong. Rodriguez's replacement, a sharp young sergeant who'd studied under him, would sometimes share the story on quiet evenings. Not the classified parts, but the important ones. About judgment and growth, about strength in unexpected forms, about the recruit with the trembling hand who'd changed everything. Did she really take down 12 enemy combatants with nerve damage? A young instructor asked once. The number doesn't matter, the sergeant replied. What matters is that she could have destroyed everyone who mocked her and chose to teach instead. She could have revealed herself immediately and chose mission over pride. She could have sought revenge and chose justice. That's the lesson. But the real ending of Emma Mitchell's story wasn't in the past or present. It was in the future she'd helped create. Every overlooked recruit who was given a chance, every instructor who learned to see beyond surface weakness, every operation saved by intelligence from someone who didn't look the part. That was her story continuing. Ghosts don't die, they multiply. And somewhere, in a place that didn't officially exist, a woman with brown hair touched with gray now sat at a desk covered in intelligence reports. Her right hand trembled as she marked locations on a map, but her left was steady as she typed recommendations that would save lives. Around her, a new generation of ghosts prepared for missions. One of them, young and eager, noticed her hand. Does it hurt? Emma looked at the tremor that had defined the last decade of her life. Every day. Then why? Because pain is just information. Limitation is just a problem to solve, and someone needs to keep the darkness at bay. She looked at the young operator. Remember that when your time comes, everyone breaks eventually. What matters is what you do with the pieces. As night fell over whatever corner of the world she currently called home, Emma Mitchell allowed herself one moment of reflection. From Syria to Fort Benning to 100 missions since, the tremor had been her constant companion. It had cost her career, her identity, her normal life, but it had also given her purpose, had taught her adaptation, had made her more dangerous than she'd ever been whole. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The network of threats never slept, never stopped evolving. But neither did she. Neither did the ghost she'd trained. Neither did the culture she'd helped change at places like Fort Benning. The tremor would get worse. Age would slow her. One day, even ghosts had to rest. But not today. Not while there were still operators in the field who needed protection. Still traitors to hunt. Still lives to save from the shadows. She closed the intelligence file and reached for the next one. Outside her window, dawn was breaking over mountains that officially didn't exist. In a country she'd never been to, on a mission that never happened. The peaks were shrouded in mist, their jagged edges cutting through clouds like the bones of ancient giants. Somewhere in those mountains, a new threat was gathering, and somewhere else, American operators were depending on intelligence they'd never know came from a ghost with a trembling hand. Her workspace was sparse. A metal desk, encrypted computers, maps covering every wall. No personal effects except for one thing, a small photo tucked into the corner of a monitor. 5 ghosts in Syria before the world went sideways. She was the only one left now, carrying their mission forward with hands that shook but never failed. Her hand shook as she opened the file, but her resolve was steady as stone. The tremor had become worse in the pre-dawn hours, when exhaustion pulled at her bones and the old nerve damage sang its familiar song. She'd learned to work with it, to time her keystrokes between spasms, to hold her coffee cup with both hands, to make her disability invisible to anyone who didn't look closely. And in her line of work, no one was supposed to look at all. Ghosts don't die, she murmured to the empty room, beginning her analysis of the next threat. They just fade until needed again. The words had become a mantra, A promise to the 4 who hadn't made it out of Syria, to the countless operators she'd saved from ambush, to the instructors at Fort Benning who now looked for strength in unexpected places. Every tremor was a reminder of the price paid. Every successful mission, a small victory against the darkness that never stopped pressing in. And somewhere, in training bases and forward operating bases and classified locations around the world, her legacy lived on. Not in monuments or medals, ghosts don't need such things. But in the minds changed, the assumptions challenged, the lives saved by people learning to see strength where others saw only weakness. In the recruit with the stutter who became a linguistic specialist. In the soldier with the limp who developed the best tactical mind of his generation. In every moment when someone chose to look deeper rather than judge faster, the tremor continued. So did the mission. It always would. Until the last ghost faded into the dawn, their work finally done. But that day was not today.